The Roman name of Florence is Florencia. The settlement that became Florence was once an Etruscan marketplace. Its original site is the spot where the Ponte Vecchio now stands. Florencia was built in the 1st century before Christ, near Via Cassia for commercial needs. Its origin is not clear. Some scholars think that the foundation was due to some veterans of Silla in the first half of the century, but others reckon that some Roman soldiers on the way home from France decided to build a military camp, castrum, on the river Arno around 50 before Christ. A legend says that the foundation of the city took place thanks to a warrior, Furenes, that eventually also gave the name to this small town, Florencia.
At the beginning it was a municipium, then it became a colony. There was a temple consecrated to Mars because Florence was built as a city for soldiers. During the ruling of Emperor Adrian, the city was enlarged, and by the 3rd century AC it was a commercial center. In 287 AC, it became the capital of the region Tuscia and Umbria, and in 405 AC, it was able to withstand the sieges of the Ostrogoths. The city was built using castrum, which was the model of the military camp.
The castrum was quadrangular, enclosed by fortifying walls, punctuated by towers and 4 central gates at cardinal points. Its main roads, the Cardo and the Decumano, were directed towards the cardinal points. They met in the main square, the Forum. Around the square was the Curia, the ancient senate, and a tried temple dedicated to pagan gods Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva.
By following the boundaries of the Roman walls from Piazza San Firenze, continue along Via Proconsolo and turn left on Borgo de Gresci, one can find the site of a semicircular theatre along the back of Palazzo Vecchio and Palazzo Gondi. Follow the curve of Via dei Leoni. The theatre was positioned on a slight angle within the city walls. Outside the walls of the Roman castrum was a Roman amphitheatre, just in front of what is now Piazza Santa Croce. Its circular form is still traceable in Via Torta and Via dei Pentaccordi. From Roman times to Christianity. The first Christian community recorded in Florence came from the east in the 3rd century after Christ and settled in the early years of the following century, where there is a clear reference to the presence of a bishop, Felix. In those years, the 4 churches were erected, San Lorenzo and Santa Reparata. San Lorenzo, it is the oldest church of Florence, built outside the Roman walls. It was consecrated in 393 by Saint Ambrose of Milan and dedicated to the martyr Lorenzo.
The church was the Cathedral of Florence for about 300 years, before the title was transferred to Santa Reparata. There is no longer any trace of this early building. Santa Reparata. Between 1965 and 1973, a major archaeological dig beneath the Cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore brought to light the remains of the old Basilica of Santa Reparata, the most significant evidence of early Christianity in Florence. It was one of the most relevant complexes of central Italy.
The structure, rich with arcades and marble columns, resembled Santa Apollinare Nuovo in Ravenna. It had 3 aisles and a separate choir. It was probably founded at the very beginning of the 5th century, but it was partly rebuilt in Carolingian times, when 2 side chapels were also added. Between 1050 and 1106, a raised choir was built above the new crypt. The floor still shows its striking original features. A peacock symbolizing immortality is the most interesting figurative element still visible.
In 1379, a decision was made to demolish the basilica completely, to leave room to the new cathedral. The Baptistry. The Baptistry of San Giovanni, one of the most ancient churches in Florence, stands opposite the city's cathedral. In the Middle Ages, people believed it was an ancient building, maybe a temple entitled to Mars, dating back to the time of the Romans. Indeed, a large part of the baptistry's marble, cladding, and other architectural elements do come from the ruins of Roman Florencia, quite possibly from a pagan temple. The current building is the result of a primeval structure, 4th-5th century, and later interventions.
The Romanesque in Florence. The Romanesque style developed in Florence between the 11th and 13th century. It spread above all in the countryside, where we can still admire some impressive Romanesque pievi, such in Cascia of Gropina. In town there are only few examples of the Romanesque architecture, but they represent the example upon which Francesco Talenti or Filippo Brunelleschi developed the main architectural elements of the Renaissance. Santi Apostoli. It is undoubtedly one of the most important example of the Romanesque style in Florence. A legend says it was inaugurated by Charlemagne in 800 on his way to Rome, where he was crowned Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire.
The facade is very simple, made of local stone. The marble door frame shows the two traditional colors, white and green, of the Tuscan Romanesque. The interior is divided in 3 aisles, with the central nave separated from the lateral aisles by green marble columns and capitals, probably coming from the Roman bath existing in the area. The walls are pretty sober, not highly decorated, according to the Romanesque taste. The bell tower is a later addition, 16th century, by Baccio d'Agnolo. San Miniato al Monte. It was built between the 11th and the 13th century. The facade is cladded with white and green marble, as other major churches of Florence, and also includes a mosaic from the 13th century over the central window.
The interior is Romanesque, with 3 naves and an elevated presbytery and a crypt. It shows stunning details. The pavement, 13th century, is finely patterned, especially the zodiac theme, here assuming a Christian value, alluding to the 12 apostles. The area of the apse is also richly decorated, with superb marble inlays on the altar, the enclosure and the pulpit, and is dominated by the beautiful mosaic bearing the date 1297. It depicts Christ in benediction between the Virgin, Saint Miniatus, the symbols of the evangelists, and the kneeling donor, and it is characterized by a technique making use of strong chromatic contrast.
Summer solstice at San Miniato. The church of San Miniato was oriented so that summer solstice sun would come through the third nave window to illuminate the sign of Cancer on the zodiac, the only sign on the zodiac that is a circular shape, making it the target for the circle of sunlight. The light, before it touches the sign of Cancer, is a small wavering squiggle, but when it reaches the Cancer sign, it morphs into a circle that fits right over the crab.
The Guelphs and the Ghibellines. In the 13th century, the rivalry between the Holy Roman Empire and the papacy increased. The empire, represented by the German family of the Hohenstaufens, claimed for the imperial supremacy, whereas the Pope stated that he had received his authority from God, and therefore he could rule by divine right. This conflict involved the entire Italian peninsula, and many cities, comuni, started to support either the emperor, the Ghibellines, or the Pope, the Guelphs. In Florence the situation was particularly complicated, because the city soon appeared to be split in 2 fierce factions. The Ghibellines were headed by the Uberti, and the Guelphs by the families of the Cerchi and Donati. Many battles were fought in the second half of the 13th century, and Florence risked to be completely destroyed after a dramatic struggle against the Siena in Montaperti in 1260.
The Florentine Ghibellines, backing their comrades from Siena, successfully defeated their fellow citizens belonging to the Guelph part. According to Siena, Florence had to be razed to the ground in order to establish a clear power all over Tuscany. At that point Farinata degli Uberti, a Florentine Ghibellin, stopped the army in Empoli and saved Florence from destruction. In 1266, the Guelphs took their revenge over the Ghibellines and Siena. The battle took place in Colle Valdelsa and marked the banishment of the Florentine Ghibellines. In 1289, in Campaldino, the conflict between Guelphs and Ghibellines came to an end in the whole region. The supporters of the emperor were defeated and exiled. Dante Alighieri, the famous poet, took part in the battle on the Guelph side.
The Guilds. After the Guelph triumph in the 13th century and the exile of the grandi or nobles from politics, Florence was governed by an oligarchy of guilds or arti. By the early 14th century, the guilds of Florence were divided into 7 major guilds called Arti Maggiori and 14 minor guilds called Arti Minori. The Arti Maggiori included some of the wealthiest and most powerful Florentines, as well as some important artists. The guild structure promoted a society proud of its intellectual culture and art. Calimala, Guild of Wool Merchants in 13th century Florence, its members formed an important segment of the city's merchant oligarchy. The guild took its name from the street on which its members kept their shops.
The merchants of the Calimala imported woolen cloth from Flanders, England, and Champagne, and, after refining it, exported it to the markets of Europe and East Asia. From 1308, the Arte della Lana building was the headquarters of one of the richest and most powerful of the 7 major guilds of medieval Florence, the Wool Guild. At its height, the Arte della Lana employed 1/3 of the working population of Florence. Its coat of arms is an Agnus Dei, Lamb of God, an emblem to be found in various representations within and without the building. Or San Michele, Church of Guilds, or never judge a book from its cover. This unique and extraordinary monument was built by the city guilds, responsible for the prosperity of the free Florentine commune. It was the place in which the grain of the commune was stored. In the middle of 14th century, the granary was consecrated for Christian worship. The merchants of the Calimala imported woolen cloth from Flanders, England, and Champagne, and, after refining it, exported it to the markets of Europe and East Asia. From 1308, the Arte della Lana building was the headquarters of one of the richest and most powerful of the 7 major guilds of medieval Florence, the Wool Guild. At its height, the Arte della Lana employed 1/3 of the working population of Florence. Its coat of arms is an Agnus Dei, Lamb of God, an emblem to be found in various representations within and without the building. Or San Michele, Church of Guilds, or never judge a book from its cover. This unique and extraordinary monument was built by the city guilds, responsible for the prosperity of the free Florentine commune. It was the place in which the grain of the commune was stored. In the middle of 14th century, the granary was consecrated for Christian worship.
While Or San Michele continued to function as a commercial site for some time, pilgrims, inspired by the story of the miraculous appearance of the Madonna there, began visiting the site in increasing numbers, especially in the uncertain times after the Black Plague struck in 1348. As the legend of the new Madonna of the Graces grew, a tabernacle was commissioned to protect it, still in place. This masterpiece by Andrea Orcagna was completed in 1359. Eventually, it was decided to relocate the grain market and to rededicate the building as an oratory. To this end, the open loggia was closed up around 1380. The stained glass windows added around this time are some of the oldest in Florence and illustrate the miracles of the Madonna of Or San Michele. The sculptures on the exterior were commissioned from the most famous Florentine artists in the 15th and 16th centuries for the niches on the 4 sides of the imposing building in Pietraforte. In 1410, Gheberti constructed the 2 doors that are still in use today.
The florin was a gold coin introduced by the Republic of Florence in 1252, known originally as the Fiorino d'Oro because the coin depicted the fleur-de-lis of the city's coat of arms on one side with the inscription Florencia. The coin was minted continuously until 1523 at the same standard weight and grade of 3.5 grams of 24-karat gold. The reverse side featured an image of the city's patron saint, John the Baptist, as a symbol of the currency's trustworthiness and consistency of value. It would become an important feature of Florence's centrality in the Renaissance economy of Europe. The coin was introduced by Florence to consolidate its supremacy as one of Europe's most significant exporters of a variety of products, and the rising banking empire fueling this expansion of trade.
The new religious orders played a leading role in the planning of the late medieval city. The Dominicans, who had established themselves in Florence in 1221 in the small church of Santa Maria delle Vigne, enlarged the original heart of their monastery for the first time in 1246 and then, in 1278, began the present structure. The first church of the Franciscan, dedicated to the Holy Cross, Santa Croce, dates to the second quarter of the 13th century, and in 1295 it was rebuilt as we see it today. And the same thing happened with Agostinians of Santo Spirito, who established themselves in the heart of Oltrarno in 1259, which was enlarged in 1296. In addition to restructuring the precedent churches, the new religious organisms created vast convent complexes full of cloisters and room for study and work. They organized the community life of the urban population, playing a role in political and cultural as well as religious life.
The daily life of medieval monks. Monks were not usually permitted to leave the monastery unless they had some special reason and were permitted to do so by their abbot. Monks usually got up with the sun, so that could mean 4:30 a.m. in summer or a luxurious 7:30 a.m. in winter, the day being very much dictated by the availability of light. Beginning with a quick wash, monks spent an hour or so doing silent work, which for monks meant prayers, reading the text they had been assigned by their superior, or copying a specific book, a laborious process that took many months. There was also a midday mass, the high mass, and then a meal, the most important of the day. The afternoon was spent working again and ended around 4:30 p.m. in winter, which then saw another meal, or, in the case of summer, a supper around 6 p.m., followed by more work. Monks went to bed early, just after 6 p.m. in winter or 8 p.m. in summer. Monks and monasteries did give back to the community in which they lived by helping the poor and providing hospitals, orphanages, public baths, and homes for the aged. Travelers were another group who could find a room when needed. As already mentioned, in education too, monasteries played a prominent role, notably building up large libraries and teaching youths. Monasteries looked after pilgrim sites and were great patrons of the arts, not only producing their own works, but also sponsoring artists and architects to embellish their buildings and those of the community with images and texts to spread the Christian message. Finally, many monks were important contributors to the study of history, both then and now, especially with their collections of letters and biographies, vitae, of saints, famous people, and rulers.
An example of illuminated manuscript. Scriptoria were an important feature of the Middle Ages, most characteristically of Benedictine establishments because of Saint Benedict's support of literary activities. Illuminated manuscripts were the most precious products of monks' work. This was a time-consuming and labor-intensive process and could take months or years.
Although paper was available in southern Europe from the 12th century, its use did not become widespread until the late Middle Ages. There was no paper mill in England until the 15th century. Before this, the usual support for writing was parchment, also known as vellum, made from stretched, treated animal skins. A large manuscript might require one whole cow or sheepskin to make a folded sheet of 2 to 4 pages, and a thick book could require the hides of entire herds. Medieval books were therefore expensive items.
Some manuscripts were made even more precious by illumination. This term comes from the Latin word for light up or enlightened, and refers to the use of bright colors and gold to embellish initial letters or to portray entire scenes. Sometimes the initials were purely decorative, but often they work with the text to mark important passages or to enhance or comment on the meaning of the text.